After being rescued on Mustafar, Vader was manipulated by Palpatine with the lie that he had killed Padme. Consumed by guilt, Vader's emotional torment drove him away from his loyalty to the Emperor. In his desperate search for redemption, he planned to clone Padme, secretly working with scientists specializing in cloning. His obsession increased when he discovered that Padme had not died in childbirth, but that her child had been hidden. Vader confronted Palpatine, eliminating him and taking control of the Empire, but the search for Padme and their child intensified his internal conflict. Padme, after being cloned and recovering fragmented memories, reunited with Luke and Leia, plotting her escape from Vader to protect them. At the same time, Vader, torn between power and his connection to his family, faced his own demons. The story culminates in a battle between Obi-Wan and Vader, interrupted by Padme. She tries to appeal to Anakin's human side, but realizes that her internal struggle is far from over, leaving the fate of the galaxy open. While Padme raised her children on Naboo and Vader watched from afar, facing his conflicts, a new twist shook everyone involved. A clone of Anakin Skywalker created by Vader appeared, the result of the same technologies that brought Padme back. This Anakin, created without the memories of his fall to the dark side, was a purer version, connected to Jedi ideals. His presence brought hope, but also doubts and fears, as he carried the fragmented memories of the real Anakin. However, Anakin's clones soon found Padme and their children, re-establishing an emotional connection that had seemed impossible. As Obi-Wan reflected on the events, he was surprised by the appearance of Qui-Gon Jinn as a manifestation of the Force. Qui-Gon revealed that Anakin's return was part of a greater purpose of the Force, a new attempt to balance it and redeem the mistakes of the past. His words renewed Obi-Wan's hope and suggested that the fate of the galaxy was still open, leaving the possibility of a different and more harmonious future for Anakin, Padme, and their children. The legacy of the Force lived on, illuminating a path of redemption and balance. Life on Naboo was tranquil and full of peace. The clones of Padme and Anakin, Luke and Leia lived in harmony, protected by Vader's obsession with Padme and their children. Obi-Wan himself knew that this passion of the Sith Lord was the only thing that guaranteed everyone's safety, including his own. As much as he felt a constant unease about the future, the bucolic atmosphere of Naboo made it seem that, for a brief moment, the galaxy was in balance. As the days went by, Padme began to trust Anakin more and more. He turned out to be just like the original Anakin, caring, protective, and deeply attached to her and the children. Just as Padme had been perfectly recreated, the new Anakin seemed to possess the same qualities and kind heart as before. She began to relax and believe that it might be possible to live in peace again, even though Vader's shadow still hung over them. Obi-Wan, on the other hand, watched everything from afar. He preferred to give his family space, but it was impossible not to feel a pang of disbelief whenever he saw them together. For him, it was a miracle that Anakin was there, playing with Luke and Leia, smiling at Padme. The image of Padme dead and Anakin consumed by fire and the dark side was still etched in his mind. Seeing the two of them together again seemed more like a dream than reality. It was almost like a fairy tale. Peace and harmony reigned, and Obi-Wan began to perceive something different in the Force. He began to feel more deeply how the Force worked to restore balance. Anakin, Padme, and even the twins seemed to be part of something bigger, a movement that connected the entire galaxy. Obi-Wan couldn't ignore the weight of that fate. He was finally beginning to understand why Anakin had always been called the Chosen One. Obi-Wan's most constant companion was now his master, Qui-Gon Jinn. The former Jedi made frequent appearances, always bringing wise advice and deep reflections. Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon would spend hours discussing the past, the present, and the possibilities of the future. Each conversation seemed to bring more clarity to Obi-Wan, who was still struggling with the ghosts of his mistakes. He felt that Qui-Gon's presence was essential for what was to come. One day, while Obi-Wan was watching the Skywalker family in the garden, he was surprised by a new appearance from Qui-Gon. "How long do you think this peace will last?" asked the master in his usual enigmatic tone. Obi-Wan, confused, replied, "What do you mean, master?" Qui-Gon pointed to the family in the garden and continued, "What you see is a happy family, but you know very well that they are no ordinary family." Qui-Gon continued, pointing at them again, "What you see are 4 warriors. They were sent by the Force to bring balance to the galaxy." Obi-Wan remained silent, reflecting on his master's words. He smiled slightly, remembering Qui-Gon's unshakable beliefs about the Force and its designs. Although he himself had lost faith at times, his master's words always brought him back on track. "But what about us, Master?" asked Obi-Wan. "We're part of it too, aren't we?" Qui-Gon confirmed, "Yes, Obi-Wan. Our mission isn't over yet." Obi-Wan frowned and asked, "Do you think we should risk all this peace and get Anakin to face Vader again? Wouldn't we be putting everyone at risk?" The tone of his voice revealed his hesitation and concern. Qui-Gon replied firmly, "This peace is an illusion, Obi-Wan. What you see are prisoners. Just like the whole galaxy, they are trapped as long as Vader is Emperor. It's time for Anakin to assume the role he came here to play. His training must continue, and we can do it together. What do you think?" Qui-Gon's words struck Obi-Wan like a thunderbolt, bringing up all the memories of his mistakes with Anakin. Obi-Wan reflected for a few moments, fighting feelings of guilt and doubt. He knew his master was right, but he feared repeating the same mistakes of the past. Then, with a slight smile, he looked at Qui-Gon and said, "Yes, that sounds like a good idea." At that moment, Obi-Wan felt that a new journey was about to begin, and he was ready to play his part. In a relaxed conversation during a stroll through the gardens of Naboo, Obi-Wan asked Anakin, "What about your skills as a Jedi? Do you remember everything too?" Anakin smiled and, after thinking for a moment, replied with a curious look, "I never thought I'd say that, but since I got here, I've never thought about it." Obi-Wan, laughing, replied, "It really is hard to believe, but what do you say we reminisce?" Anakin laughed along, but his smile soon turned into a serious expression. "My saber," he exclaimed. "I'm a Jedi without a saber." Anakin's body was still relatively new, only a few weeks old, and he was slowly adjusting to the memories that had been activated in his DNA. He looked at Obi-Wan, who smiled slightly and said, "Are you talking about this saber?" Obi-Wan then revealed Anakin's old lightsaber, which he had retrieved on Mustafar and which, in the original timeline, he had planned to give to Luke. On seeing his old saber, Anakin was startled. It was as if a wave of memories hit him all at once. He picked it up, switched it on, and began to make a few movements with it. The movements, however, were slow and clumsy. Anakin looked uncomfortable and glanced at Obi-Wan, who gave him a reassuring look. "Give your new body time to get used to it," said Obi-Wan. Anakin nodded and continued practicing. Then, in an amused tone, Obi-Wan joked, "You seem to be evolving. Let me help you." Then he suddenly attacked Anakin lightly, forcing him to defend himself. The training, which began lightly, soon became more dynamic, but something unexpected happened. As Obi-Wan intentionally opened his guard, Anakin instinctively reached out to push him away with the Force, but nothing happened. He tried again and nothing. The two looked at each other in surprise. Obi-Wan was seeing the Chosen One, the one who had been created by the Force, unable to use it. Anakin, disappointed, tried again, but still to no avail. Obi-Wan, trying to reassure him, said, "It's all right, your connection will come back little by little." Anakin forced a smile, but they were both worried. No contact with the Force? That was unusual. Over the next few days, they continued their light training, but the absence of a connection with the Force persisted. Worried, Obi-Wan decided to seek answers with Qui-Gon. During a meditation, Obi-Wan asked, "Master, are you following the training?" Qui-Gon appeared and replied, "Yes. Anakin is the Chosen One. He was created by the Force. He should have natural contact with it, even if he is a clone." Obi-Wan then pondered, "But this Anakin was created in a laboratory." The two looked at each other, clearly worried. Qui-Gon suggested, "Test him for midichlorians." Obi-Wan called Anakin to carry out the test, a simple procedure, but one whose results would be revealing. When the results came back, Obi-Wan was stunned. 0. Anakin had no midichlorians. Obi-Wan explained, all living beings have midichlorians. They are the connection to the Force. But you don't have any. Anakin remained silent, processing the information. They both began to suspect that Vader had genetically manipulated him, ensuring that he posed no threat to his power, while still seeming perfect for Padme. Qui-Gon, still following, said, that explains why Anakin can't predict your movements. He's not connected to the Force, but keep trying. Bring him into deeper meditation. We may find a solution. Obi-Wan nodded, determined. He began to take Anakin regularly to a small cave near the palace garden on Naboo, a quiet, secluded spot ideal for meditation. Anakin, although frustrated, began to dedicate himself more diligently. During one of these meditation sessions, Obi-Wan felt a slight disturbance in the Force, something that Anakin clearly didn't notice. He remained calm, observing, until a familiar figure appeared at the entrance to the cave, shrouded in a soft light. Obi-Wan, immediately recognizing the presence, said in a loud voice, Master Yoda. Anakin opened his eyes, startled, looking at the small figure who entered the cave with his characteristic gait. It was as if the Force was once again moving to bring answers. Anakin, surprised to see Yoda, repeated his master's exclamation. Master Yoda, Obi-Wan, still stunned by the apparition, asked, What are you doing here? How did you know we were here? Yoda, with his enigmatic tone, replied, You're the only one who has contact with Qui-Gon? Aren't you? Have you forgotten? A smile escaped Obi-Wan's lips as he remembered that it was Yoda himself who had taught him how to connect with his former master. It was clear that Qui-Gon himself had told Yoda everything. Slowly, Yoda approached Anakin and said, It seems that you need to regain contact with the Force, young Skywalker. Anakin looked at Obi-Wan curiously, as if waiting for an explanation. Obi-Wan shrugged and said, Do you know how to do that, Master? Yoda replied with his usual calm, I don't, but the Force. It knows everything, young man. He let out his characteristic laugh before beginning his instructions. Yoda wasted no time in beginning his instructions. Close your eyes, young Skywalker. Remember, the Force is an energy field created by all living beings. Surrounds us, penetrates us. It unites the galaxy. The Force is your father, it gave you life. Creates everything, gives life to everything. A simple laboratory procedure cannot undo this. One with the Force, one with your father you must be. When you are ready, whatever you ask, the Force will give you. The words echoed in the cave as Anakin listened intently. Yoda continued, But remember, the first step you must always take. Breathe. Take the first step. Breathe. Feel the Force. Visualize your body with the amount of midichlorians the Force has given you. He signaled to Obi-Wan that it was time to leave and let Anakin go deeper into meditation. The young Jedi remained in the cave, trying to connect with something that seemed distant, almost unreachable. Outside, Yoda and Obi-Wan walked through the serene garden of Naboo. Obi-Wan broke the silence. It's good to have you here, Master. But tell me, how is it possible for a living being not to have midichlorians? Yoda thoughtfully replied, As far as I know, it's not. Something against nature, that is. Obi-Wan, even more puzzled, asked, Then how is he alive? Yoda shook his head slowly and replied, Honestly, I don't know. But without midichlorians, his vital energy, which comes from the Force, will diminish over time. Obi-Wan was alarmed. Are you saying that his days are numbered, Master? Yoda sighed and said, Hard to say. That is, we don't know what Vader had done in the lab to make his new version survive without midichlorians. But if that's the case, we don't have much time. The possibility of Anakin having a limited existence hung in the air, adding a new layer of tension to the already complicated scenario. Obi-Wan pondered. Could it be that Vader just wanted Padme to have a few moments with the clone, without his power being threatened? Yoda, silent, didn't answer. They both knew that this was a dark but plausible possibility. After all, everything Vader did was calculated, always with a view to protecting his domain. But that question would remain unanswered at least for the time being. As the days passed, Anakin continued his training under Yoda's supervision. The Jedi Master insisted that he act as if he were already connected to the Force. "Don't try to move objects, young Skywalker," said Yoda. "If you can't, your belief that you can't will be reinforced. Don't try anything, do it or don't do it. For now, just visualize your full powers restored." It was a slow process, but Yoda believed that the path to the Force began in the mind. Qui-Gon Jinn also made regular appearances during training. However, because of his connection to the Force, only Obi-Wan and Yoda could see him. He offered advice and encouragement, but weeks passed without any visible change in Anakin. Until one day, Bail Organa arrived with important news and a request for help. Her arrival brought a new focus to the group. While Luke and Leia played in the garden, Bail talked to Padme, Obi-Wan, Yoda, and Anakin. He explained that the moves to maintain the Empire's stability were intensifying. "Vader is more incisive than Palpatine ever was," said Bail. "He tolerates no opposition and is crushing anyone who dares to challenge him. The Empire is growing stronger every day." His words were a reminder that, despite the apparent tranquility on Naboo, the galaxy was far from knowing true peace. Bail went on to report on the Empire's actions, explaining that a rebel alliance was beginning to form, but was being hunted mercilessly by Vader. "He's not just crushing any attempt at resistance," said Bail. "He's also set up a group called the Inquisitors, who travel the galaxy tracking down and eliminating the surviving Jedi." Tension grew among those present as Bail's words echoed, revealing the devastating reach of Vader's power. Everyone listened with a mixture of fear and concern, but on Anakin, the impact was different. He was visibly upset, outraged that his dark version, Darth Vader, was perpetuating so much suffering. He could barely process the idea that, in a way, he was the one behind it all. It was a unique conflict, as if part of himself was out there, acting as an implacable enemy. The feeling of guilt growing inside Anakin was hard to describe. He felt as if, somehow, all those actions were his responsibility. Even though he was a clone, he carried the memories and experiences of the original, and this made Vader's atrocities weigh on him as if they were his own. It was a duality that consumed him, a constant reminder of what he could be and how far he could fall. As Bail continued to recount Vader's atrocities, something began to change inside Anakin. With each new account, he felt a mixture of anger and determination rise up. Indignation took hold of his heart, and it seemed that the idealism that characterized the old Anakin Skywalker was reawakening. He was no longer just a spectator of destruction. He felt the need to do something to stop Vader's advance. Padme, always attentive to Anakin's emotions, noticed the growing disturbance in his countenance. She asked Bail to stop talking, but it was too late. Obi-Wan also noticed and asked, "Are you all right, Anakin?" After a few seconds of silence, Anakin stood up abruptly and began pacing back and forth. "I can't believe I was able to do all this," he exclaimed. Padme tried to reassure him, saying, "But he's not you, Anakin." However, he replied with intensity, "You don't understand. We are the same being. He is what I have become. We have the same memories, we experience the same things. I am him in potential." Everyone was silent, taking in Anakin's words. He wasn't wrong. It was true that, in a way, Vader represented an extension of who he could have been. He was a dark reflection of his own potential. The guilt Anakin felt was understandable, but it was driving his mind into a state of great turmoil. It seemed that his anguish was about to culminate in something unexpected. While everyone was caught up in the tension of the conversation, Leia, still very small, was playing with Luke on a balcony. Suddenly, she overbalanced and fell to the ground upside down. Anakin's cry cut through the air. "Leia, no!" In a reflex, he reached out towards her, and the unexpected happened. Leia stopped in mid-air, just a few centimeters from the ground. With a subtle movement, Anakin turned her upside down and slowly placed her safely on the ground. Padme ran over to Leia, hugging her tightly as tears streamed down her face. Yoda and Obi-Wan, watching the scene, exchanged glances and smiled slightly. something had changed. Anakin's connection with the Force was back. He had rescued Leia instinctively, without hesitation. It was as if the Force, through that emergency, had rekindled the lost link. It had worked. Anakin Skywalker was back. Anakin, still standing still, looked down at his hands as if he couldn't believe what had just happened. He was overwhelmed by a mixture of emotions: relief, surprise, and a new sense of purpose. After the shock wore off, Anakin said with conviction, "We have to go on." His words reflected a new determination. He was ready to resume his role and rebuild his connection with the Force. With that, the training continued with even more vigor. Under the guidance of Yoda and Obi-Wan, Anakin immersed himself in meditations, visualizations, and lightsaber exercises. He worked constantly to predict movements, visualize the future, and strengthen his connection with the Force. Every day, Anakin felt closer to the Jedi he once was, but now with a new wisdom, forged by his experiences and the struggles he had with himself. During a training session, Qui-Gon Jinn appeared and watched Anakin with a satisfied look. As they chatted, he said, "It looks like the boy is ready, Master." Anakin, to everyone's surprise, quickly replied, "Master Qui-Gon." For the first time, he could visualize his old master. The group laughed, happy at Anakin's reconnection with the Force. Master Yoda smiled and concluded, "You're right, Qui-Gon. I would say that in this quest to learn all over again, a new Anakin, much more powerful, has emerged." Anakin thanked him with a look and a nod, feeling prepared for what was to come. Obi-Wan, seeking guidance, asked, "Master Yoda, how should we proceed? Should Anakin confront Vader directly?" Yoda nodded. "Yes, a confrontation between the two is inevitable." Anakin, determined, said, "I'll put an end to it. He must be eliminated." But Yoda interrupted him. "Seriously, no, you mustn't act like that. It will lead you to the dark side, just as it did with Vader." Anakin, confused, asked, "Then what should I do?" Yoda explained, "You should only eliminate him if there are no other options left. If you defeat him, you must offer redemption. Remember, when you face Vader, you face yourself. His redemption will also be yours." Yoda's words touched Anakin deeply, as they reflected his own inner conflicts. Qui-Gon added, "But remember, Anakin, the Emperor is cunning. You must be careful of his tricks." Anakin asked, "And how would I know?" Qui-Gon replied firmly, "Don't you remember? Feel, don't think. Use your instincts. May the Force be with you." Anakin smiled briefly as Qui-Gon's figure disappeared, leaving him with the responsibility of facing not only Vader, but also his own fears and doubts. Obi-Wan and Yoda summoned Bail Organa for a strategy meeting. During the conversation, Obi-Wan had an idea that could give Anakin an advantage. "Mustafar," he exclaimed. "Let's lure him to Mustafar. There, Anakin will have an emotional advantage." The place where Anakin had definitely fallen to the dark side would be the perfect stage for a confrontation that would require more of Vader's psyche than his brute strength. Anakin nodded, understanding the plan and accepting the challenge. Anakin knew how important Mustafar was, even if his memory of the battle had been erased. Vader had told him the whole story, making him aware of how it all happened, even without the direct memories. He nodded and said, "If that's where it all began, that's where it must end." The plan was to send a message to Vader, challenging him to a confrontation on Mustafar. Obi-Wan added, "He'll know it's a trap, but he won't resist the opportunity for revenge." Bail took it upon himself to inform the Rebel Alliance, who were waiting for an opportunity to attack the Empire. They would plan a coordinated attack, where Anakin would face Vader, while the rebels would deal with the Imperial escort. Before they left, Yoda announced something unexpected. "My mission ends here." Obi-Wan, surprised, asked, "What do you mean, Master? We still have so much to learn from you." Yoda replied calmly, "The Force has given me one last mission with young Skywalker. You must take care of the new Jedi Order. Now I must rest. May the Force be with you." He went into a position of meditation and disappeared, joining the Force. It was time to say goodbye. Anakin said goodbye to Luke and Leia, while Padme accompanied them to the Naboo hangar. The farewell between Padme and Anakin was emotional. She hugged him tightly, whispering, "Come back to us." He smiled, returned the hug, and assured her, "I will." They then set off to find the rebels and head for the Mustafar system, where the decisive confrontation awaited them. When they reached Mustafar, Obi-Wan sent the message challenging Vader. As expected, he arrived shortly afterwards, bringing a powerful escort. The rebel plan was simple but risky. Vader, although aware that it was a trap, was willing to face Obi-Wan because his thirst for revenge was greater than his prudence. He knew that his power was enough to defeat and crush any resistance. When Vader landed, his presence was immediately felt. His escort advanced, but Obi-Wan, playing his part, attacked the stormtroopers, ensuring that Anakin had room to confront Vader. The confrontation was about to begin, and Mustafar would once again be the scene of a battle that would change the course of the galaxy. Face to face, Anakin and Vader stared at each other like two sides of the same coin. Vader broke the silence, saying, "What are you doing here, Anakin? You know you don't have the power to fight me." But Anakin replied with determination, "This ends here." The tension increased when Vader felt something strange. "No, it can't be," he muttered, realizing Anakin's connection to the Force. Before he could react, Anakin lunged forward with his saber, attacking with all the strength he possessed, aware that the fate of his family and the Republic was in his hands. The battle between the two was intense, with quick, precise blows that lit up Mustafar's gloomy atmosphere. Anakin's every move seemed more agile and assured, while Vader, though powerful, showed signs of limitation due to his armor. The sound of sabers echoed across the battlefield, mixed with Vader's mechanical breathing. Anakin was fighting not just a physical enemy, but the shadow of what he himself could have become. The emotion of the battle was inflamed by the Mustafar lavas that flowed around them. A fight that was not just for the galaxy, but for redemption. With a precise blow, Anakin managed to break part of Vader's mask, revealing his disfigured face. He then cut off the mechanical arm of Vader's armor, sending his saber flying. Vader fell backwards, defeated, while Anakin remained standing, staring at what was left of his opponent's face. It was a moment of impact, when Anakin realized how monstrous he could have become if he had followed the same dark path. He was paralyzed, overcome by a mixture of horror and empathy. Anakin, with a firm voice, asked, "What have you become?" Vader, in a grave tone, replied, "What you, Anakin, have become. I am you." Those words echoed in Anakin's mind, and he shook his head in denial. "No, you are not me. There is still light inside you." He continued, "Hand the power of the Empire back to the Senate, or it will all end here for you." But Vader, stubborn, replied, "We are one. Together we will be unbeatable. Come and rule with me." Anakin replied firmly, "And I invite you to return to the light side and see your family grow up happily." For a moment, silence took over, and Vader, thinking of Padme, hesitated. Anakin insisted, "So, what do you say?" Vader, his voice filled with resignation, replied, "As you wish." Anakin, determined, said, "Give the order." After hesitating for a moment, Vader finally gave the order for the attack to cease. The Imperial ships retreated, and silence overtook Mustafar's airspace. Obi-Wan, who had confronted the stormtroopers escorting Vader, arrived on the scene, seeing that the confrontation between Anakin and Vader had come to an end. Anakin, without looking away from Vader, made a decision. With one swift blow, he cut off the two mechanical legs and hit the center of Vader's armor, completely immobilizing him. He then picked up the fallen lightsaber and, looking at Obi-Wan, said, "Help me carry it." Together, the two of them carried the defeated Vader, who no longer seemed to be able to resist. The moment symbolized victory not only over Vader, but also over darkness. Back on Coruscant, Anakin forced Vader to dismiss his entire command and convene the Senate. In front of everyone, Vader was forced to hand power back to the Republic. The scene was remarkable, with leaders from all over the galaxy witnessing the moment when the Empire began to crumble. It was the start of a new chapter, a chance for the Republic to rebuild. Vader was then tried by the Senate for his crimes and sentenced to spend the rest of his life in prison. Even so, Anakin, Obi-Wan, and Padme continued to visit him. Anakin believed in redemption and made a point of showing Vader that there was still a path to the light. The visits were moments of reflection and an attempt to reconnect, even with the scars of the past. Meanwhile, the Skywalker family was finally able to rest in peace on Naboo. Luke and Leia grew up surrounded by Padme's love and Anakin's protection. Together, Obi-Wan and Anakin began to rebuild the Jedi Order, following the guidance of Qui-Gon Jinn and Yoda, who were now one with the Force. The galaxy finally had hope again, as the balance of the Force was restored.